Jake Morrison had never felt so small in his entire life. The assembly hall of the Vraxian Imperial Station stretched out before him like a cathedral built for gods. The ceiling disappeared into darkness somewhere far above, and the walls were made of something that looked like crystal but shimmered with colors he didn't have names for. Hundreds of aliens from across the galaxy filled the massive space, and every single one of them seemed more important, more powerful, and more confident than he was. Jake clutched his datapad tighter and tried to stay close to Ambassador Linda Chen. She walked with her head high, her diplomatic uniform crisp and perfect. Jake's own uniform felt too tight around his collar. He was just a diplomatic aide, 26 years old, and this was his first major assignment off Earth. He was supposed to take notes, carry equipment, and stay out of the way. "Stay close," Ambassador Chen said without looking back at him. "Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact with anyone above a grade 7 diplomatic rank. And for the love of God, don't touch anything." "Yes, ma'am," Jake whispered. They moved through the crowd. Jake tried not to stare, but it was impossible. To his left, a being that looked like it was made of living metal conversed with a creature covered in purple fur. To his right, something with 6 legs and crystal eyes floated past, leaving a trail of sweet-smelling mist. He'd studied dozens of species before coming here, but seeing them in person was completely different. The Centennial Peace Summit only happened once every 100 years. Every major species in the known galaxy sent representatives. It was supposed to be a celebration of cooperation, a reminder that the galaxy had chosen peace over war. But Jake had read the briefings. He knew there were tensions under the surface. Some species wanted to change the old agreements, some wanted more power, and humanity, having only joined the galactic community 30 years ago, was barely a footnote in these discussions. "There," Ambassador Chen said, nodding toward a section of seats near the back. "We'll sit there." Jake felt a small relief. The back of the hall was perfect. Nobody would notice them there. They could observe, take notes, and go home without causing any problems. That was the goal. Earth's government had been very clear. Don't make waves, don't pick sides, just learn and stay safe. But as they moved toward the back section, Jake noticed something that made him pause. A small alien, maybe 3 feet tall with gray skin and large eyes, had dropped a tray of what looked like refreshments. The tray had clattered to the floor, and now the little alien was scrambling to pick up the scattered items. Its hands were shaking. Other delegates walked past without a glance. A few looked annoyed at the obstacle in their path. One large reptilian alien actually stepped over the scattered mess with a snort of disgust. Jake looked at Ambassador Chen. She was still walking toward their seats, not noticing. He looked back at the small alien. It was clearly distressed, making small whimpering sounds as it tried to gather everything. Jake made a decision. He stepped away from the ambassador's path and knelt down next to the small alien. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "Let me help." The alien looked up at him with huge, terrified eyes. It started to shake its head rapidly, backing away slightly. "It's fine, really," Jake said. He kept his voice gentle and started picking up the fallen items. They looked like small glasses made of something organic. Accidents happen. No big deal. For a moment, the alien just stared at him. Then slowly it started helping again. Together they gathered everything back onto the tray. Jake noticed the alien's uniform had a simple brown color with no markings. A servant, probably. Someone considered low-ranking. "There you go," Jake said, placing the last glass on the tray. He smiled at the small alien. "All good." The alien looked at him for a long moment, then pressed its small hands together and bowed its head. It scurried away quickly, disappearing through a side door. Jake stood up and brushed off his knees. When he turned around, he realized Ambassador Chen had moved far ahead. He hurried to catch up, weaving between tall aliens and trying not to bump into anyone. The assembly hall was beginning to fill up completely now. Every seat seemed to be taken. Jake scanned the back section where the ambassador had been heading, but he couldn't see her anymore. The crowd was too thick. He felt a flutter of panic in his chest. Where was she? He kept moving forward, looking for any open seat, any familiar face. The ceremony was about to begin. He could see important-looking aliens taking their places at a huge raised platform at the front of the hall. That must be the high table, where the most powerful species sat. Jake spotted a few empty seats in a middle section and started making his way toward them. His heart was pounding now. He just needed to sit down and not draw attention to himself. Maybe he could find Ambassador Chen after the opening ceremony. He was 3 steps away from an empty chair when he felt it. A hand on his wrist. Not grabbing hard, but firm enough to stop him completely. Jake turned and his breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at. Her skin was a luminescent blue that seemed to glow from within. She had 4 arms, each moving with perfect grace. Her eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils like a cat's. She wore robes that looked like they were woven from starlight itself, and on her head sat a thin circlet of silver that marked her as royalty. Jake knew who she was immediately. Everyone who had studied for this summit knew. Princess Kaylin of the Vraxian Empire, daughter of Emperor Voresh, heir to half the known galaxy. She looked directly at him with those golden eyes and spoke in a voice that carried easily despite the noise around them. "Sit here." She gestured to the seat directly beside her, at the high table, where only the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat. Jake's mouth went dry. Every species within sight turned to stare. The noise of the hall seemed to drop away to nothing. He was aware of hundreds of eyes on him. He could see Ambassador Chen in the distance, her face frozen in shock. I'm sorry, Your Highness," Jake managed to say. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "There must be a mistake. I'm just an aide. I should sit in the back." Princess Kaylin tilted her head slightly, still holding his wrist. Her grip was gentle but absolutely certain. "There is no mistake," she said. "You will sit beside me." Jake's mind raced. He couldn't refuse a direct order from Vraxian royalty. That would be an insult that could have diplomatic consequences. But sitting at the high table? That was insane. Humans didn't sit there. Minor species didn't sit there. What was happening? "But I'm not," he started to say. "You are exactly where you should be," Princess Kaylin interrupted. She released his wrist and gestured again to the seat. It wasn't a request. Jake swallowed hard and sat down. The chair was made for someone larger than him and his feet barely touched the floor. He felt like a child sitting at the adult's table. Around him, the other beings at the high table stared. To his right sat a massive creature that looked like an upright bear covered in silver fur. To his left, Princess Kaylin settled into her own seat with perfect poise. Across the table, a being made of what looked like living water rippled with what might have been curiosity or disgust. Whispers filled the hall. Jake could hear them even though he couldn't understand most of the languages. "Who is that? A human? At the high table? What is Vrax doing?" This is unprecedented. Ambassador Chen had managed to make her way closer. She stood at the edge of the platform, her face pale. She caught Jake's eye and gave him a tiny shake of her head. She didn't know what to do either. Princess Kaylin raised one of her 4 hands and the hall fell silent immediately. That was power, Jake realized. She didn't need to shout or demand attention. She simply existed and everyone listened. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying throughout the massive space. "The Centennial Peace Summit begins. We gather to celebrate cooperation, to honor our treaties, and to discuss the future of our galactic community." She paused, and her golden eyes swept across the assembly. When she spoke again, her words were deliberate and clear. "For this summit, I have chosen a personal advisor. Jake Morrison of Earth will serve in this capacity. His voice will be heard in all matters I consider." The whispers exploded into actual talking. Aliens turned to each other in confusion and anger. Jake felt his face burning. He wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. A voice boomed from across the high table. "Your Highness, with respect, this is highly irregular." Jake looked up and saw the speaker. It was a massive reptilian alien with red scales and eyes that burned like coals. He wore armor that looked like it was made from black metal, and metals covered his chest. Jake recognized him from the briefings. War Chief Throck of the Korthan Dominion, one of the most aggressive military powers in the galaxy. "The high table is reserved for species of significance," Throck continued. His voice dripped with contempt. "Humans are barely more than children in galactic terms. They have no armies worth mentioning, no territory beyond their single system, and no achievements that warrant such an honor." Princess Kaylin turned her gaze to Throck. Her expression didn't change, but something in the air seemed to shift. Jake felt the temperature drop slightly. "I'm aware of the traditions, War Chief," she said calmly. "I am also aware that traditions can evolve. Or perhaps you wish to question the judgment of two." The opening ceremony lasted 3 hours. Jake stood through all of it. his legs aching, trying not to move too much or draw more attention to himself. Delegates from every major species gave speeches about peace and cooperation. Some speeches were in languages that Jake's translator earpiece could barely handle, coming out as strange poetry or half-formed concepts. Princess Kaylin stood beside him the entire time, perfectly still and composed. She didn't seem tired or uncomfortable at all. Jake envied that. When the ceremony finally ended, Jake hoped he could slip away and find Ambassador Chen. He needed to understand what was happening. But as the delegates began to disperse, Princess Kaylin turned to him. "Come with me," she said simply. It wasn't a request. Jake followed her as she glided through the crowd. Other aliens moved out of her way immediately, bowing their heads or making gestures of respect. Jake hurried behind her, very aware that people were staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. They left the main assembly hall and entered a corridor that was quieter and less crowded. The walls here were covered in what looked like growing vines, but the plants glowed softly with their own light. 2 large Vraxian guards followed at a distance, keeping others away. Princess Kaylin led him to a small chamber off the main corridor. The room was simple but elegant, with curved furniture and a window that looked out onto the stars. She dismissed the guards with a gesture and closed the door behind them. Jake stood awkwardly near the entrance, not sure what to do. Princess Kaylin moved to the window and looked out at the stars for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before, more personal. "You must be very confused." "Yes, Your Highness," Jake admitted. There was no point in lying. She turned to face him. In the softer light of the chamber, her blue skin seemed even more luminescent. "You want to know why I chose you?" "I really do," Jake said. "I'm nobody. I'm just an aide. I shouldn't be sitting at the high table. I shouldn't even be in the same room with you right now." Princess Kaylin was quiet for a moment. Then she moved to one of the curved seats and gestured for him to sit as well. Jake sat carefully, perched on the edge of his seat. 2 days ago, she began. During the arrival ceremonies, I was observing the delegates. It is something I do. I watch how beings behave when they think no one important is looking. It tells me more about them than any formal introduction ever could. Jake listened, his heart starting to beat faster. He had a feeling he knew where this was going. "I saw you help one of our servants," Princess Kaylin continued. "A small Vraxian of the worker caste. He had dropped his tray, and you stopped to help him pick up the items. Do you remember this?" "Yes," Jake said. "It wasn't a big deal." He looked upset, so I just helped. "It was not a big deal to you," Princess Kaylin said, her golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "But to me and to any Vraxian who understands our culture, it was everything." Jake frowned. "I don't understand. In Vraxian society, we have a strict hierarchy," she explained. "It has served us well for thousands of years. Everyone has their place. The ruling families, the military, the scholars, the workers. Each level serves its purpose. But there is a teaching in our oldest texts, one that many have forgotten. It says that true leaders are known not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those who can do nothing for them." She stood and walked to the window again, her 4 hands clasped together in front of her. I watched dozens of delegates pass by that servant. Some ignored him. Some looked annoyed. One actually kicked at the dropped items as if they were trash. But you, a human from a species that most of this galaxy considers weak and unimportant, you stopped. You knelt down. You helped. And you smiled at him. Jake felt his face getting warm. It was just the right thing to do. "Exactly," Princess Kaylin said, turning back to him. "You did not help him because someone was watching. You did not help him to gain favor or status. You helped him because to you he was a person who needed help. That is why I chose you." Jake sat back in his seat trying to process this. "But I still don't understand why that means I should sit at the high table. I don't know anything about galactic politics. I'm going to mess something up." "Perhaps," Princess Kaylin said. "Or perhaps you will see things that others miss. Tell me, Jake Morrison, what do you know about this summit? What do you truly know?" Jake thought about the briefings he'd read. It's supposed to be a celebration of the peace treaty, but there are some species who want to change some of the old agreements. "That is the surface," Princess Kaylin said. She moved closer to him and her voice became more serious. "The deeper truth is that there are powerful species who wish to pass new legislation. They call it the Tributary Species Act. Have you heard of this?" Jake shook his head. The act would allow powerful species to claim weaker ones as tributaries. They would not call it slavery. They would use words like protection and guidance, but in practice, smaller civilizations would become property. They would have no voice, no choice. They would exist only to serve the strong. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. That's horrible. Yes, Princess Kaelin agreed. But many species see it as natural. They believe that strength should rule, that the weak exist only to be dominated. War Chief Throck and his Korthan Dominion lead this movement. They have convinced several other powerful species to support them. What about Vrax? Jake asked. What about your empire? Princess Kaelin's expression became troubled. My father, the Emperor, is considering supporting the act. He believes it would strengthen our position and prevent future wars. If the hierarchy is made clear and legal, he thinks there will be less conflict. But you don't agree, Jake said. It wasn't a question. No, she said quietly. I believe it is wrong. I believe it will lead to suffering on a scale we cannot imagine. But I am young by Vraxian standards, and many see my views as idealistic. They say I do not understand the harsh realities of galactic politics. She looked directly at him. That is why I need you. You come from a species that has no power here, no status, but you have something that many have lost. You have compassion. You see people, not positions. I need that perspective as I try to fight against this legislation. Jake felt overwhelmed. This was so much bigger than he had imagined. Ambassador Chen is not going to like this. Earth doesn't want to get involved in major galactic conflicts. We're too small, too weak. If we make enemies... I understand your fear, Princess Kaelin said. But consider this. If the Tributary Species Act passes, how long do you think it will be before someone decides that humanity should be a tributary species? You have one star system. You have a small military. By the standards they are setting, you would be perfect targets. Jake felt his stomach twist. He hadn't thought of that. This is not just about idealism, Princess Kaelin continued. This is about survival. Not just for humans, but for dozens of species who cannot defend themselves against the strong. If we do not stand against this now, we may not get another chance. Jake stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness between them. Somewhere out there was Earth, tiny and fragile. He thought about his family back home. His parents, his younger sister. They had no idea that decisions being made here could determine whether humanity remained free or became property of some alien empire. What do you need me to do? He asked. I need you to be honest, Princess Kaelin said. When I ask for your opinion, give it. Do not tell me what you think I want to hear. I have advisors for that. I need someone who will tell me the truth as they see it. I can do that, Jake said. I'm not good at lying anyway. For the first time, Princess Kaelin smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. I know. That is one of the reasons I chose you. A soft chime sounded in the room. Princess Kaelin touched a panel on the wall, and a voice spoke in the Vraxian language. She responded briefly, then turned back to Jake. The subcommittee meetings begin in 1 hour. You will accompany me to the discussions on the Tributary Species Act. Prepare yourself. It will not be pleasant, Jake nodded. I should probably find Ambassador Chen first. She's going to want to know what's happening. She has already been informed, Princess Kaelin said. My staff contacted her during the ceremony. She was not pleased, but she understands the situation. Great, Jake muttered. He could imagine how that conversation had gone. As they left the chamber and walked back toward the main corridors, Jake felt the weight of what he had agreed to. He was a 26-year-old aide from Earth, and he was about to walk into negotiations that could determine the fate of countless worlds. It was terrifying. But he thought about that small Vraxian servant scared and alone, picking up dropped glasses while everyone else walked past. He thought about all the small species, all the worlds that had no voice in these discussions. Someone needed to stand up for them. Maybe that someone could be him. They reached a junction where several corridors met. A group of delegates was passing through, and Jake saw War Chief Throck among them. The massive Korthan stopped when he saw Jake and Princess Kaelin together. Throck's eyes narrowed. He said something in his own language that Jake's translator couldn't quite catch, but the tone was clear. It was contemptuous, mocking. The subcommittee meeting room was smaller than the main assembly hall, but somehow felt more intimidating. About 50 delegates sat around a circular table, representing the species that had the most interest in the Tributary Species Act. Jake sat between Princess Kaelin and an empty chair, Very aware that he was the only human in the room, the discussion started calmly enough. Different species presented their views on how to manage relationships between powerful and weaker civilizations. Some spoke about historical precedents. Others talked about economic benefits. Jake listened carefully, taking notes on his datapad, but as the hours passed, the tone changed. The delegates supporting the act began to speak more boldly. They argued that the galaxy needed order, that chaos came from allowing too many species to have equal voices. War Chief Throck spoke at length about how his Corthan dominion had brought peace to troubled regions by establishing clear hierarchies. Strength is the only language the universe understands, Throck declared, his red scales gleaming under the lights. Those who are weak should be grateful to serve those who are strong. It is natural. It is right. Princess Kaylin responded with careful diplomatic language, pointing out the flaws in his reasoning. Other delegates joined in, some supporting her, others opposing. The debate went in circles. During a brief break, Jake stepped out into the corridor to clear his head. He was leaning against the wall, trying to organize his thoughts, when Ambassador Chen appeared beside him. "Jake," she said quietly. Her face was stern. "We need to talk." "I know you're angry," Jake said. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I'm not angry," Ambassador Chen said, though her voice suggested otherwise. "I'm concerned. Do you understand the position you've put Earth in? By accepting Princess Kaylin's offer, you've made humanity visible. People are paying attention to us now. That can be dangerous." "I know," Jake said. "But what was I supposed to do? Refuse a Vraxian princess in front of the entire galaxy?" Ambassador Chen sighed. "No, you couldn't do that. But now we're in this situation and we have to be very careful. Earth cannot afford to make enemies, Jake. We're too small, too vulnerable. So we just stay quiet while they pass laws that could eventually be used against us?" Jake asked. Ambassador Chen looked at him for a long moment. "Is that what you think this is about?" "Princess Kaylin explained it to me," Jake said. "If the Tributary Species Act passes, humanity could be next. We're weak by galactic standards. We'd be perfect targets." "She's not wrong," Ambassador Chen admitted, "but fighting against it could make us targets even faster. Do you see the problem?" Jake did see it. They were damned either way. Stay quiet and hope to be ignored, or speak up and risk immediate retaliation. "What would you do?" Jake asked. Ambassador Chen looked out the window at the stars. "I honestly don't know. But since you're already in this position, I need you to be smart. Listen more than you speak. Don't make promises on behalf of Earth, and for God's sake, don't do anything to provoke Throck further." "He's already taken a dislike to you, I noticed," Jake said dryly. They returned to the meeting room together. The break was ending and delegates were taking their seats again. Jake sat down next to Princess Kaylin and the discussion resumed. Then, about an hour into the afternoon session, War Chief Throck stood up. His massive form dominated the room. "I have heard enough talk," he announced. "Words are cheap. Any species can claim to be worthy, but the galaxy respects only those who can prove their worth. I propose that we settle this debate properly." Princess Kaylin's expression became wary. "What are you suggesting, War Chief?" "The trial of merit," Throck said. A murmur went through the room. "An ancient tradition. Those who wish to be heard must first prove they have the strength to speak. I challenge the human to participate." Jake felt every eye in the room turn to him. His heart started pounding. "That is unnecessary," Princess Kaylin said coolly. "Jake Morrison is my advisor, not a warrior." "Exactly my point," Throck said with a sharp-toothed grin. "If humanity wishes to have a voice at this table, let them prove they deserve it. Or perhaps they will show their weakness for all to see." "The trial of merit is voluntary," another delegate said. Jake recognized her as a tall, slender alien with silver skin. "No one can be forced to participate." "Of course not," Throck agreed. "But if the human refuses, everyone here will know what that means. Humanity is weak. Their opinions are worthless. And their princess friend has made a poor choice in her advisors. It was a trap. Jake could see it clearly. If he refused, he would prove Throck's point. Princess Kaylin would lose credibility, and humanity would be marked as cowardly. But if he accepted, he would almost certainly fail. Humans weren't as strong as most species, not as fast, not as powerful. Jake looked at Ambassador Chen. Her face was pale, and she gave a tiny shake of her head. "Don't do it," her expression said. But Jake thought about what was at stake. He thought about all the small species who would suffer if the Tributary Species Act passed. He thought about Earth, vulnerable and alone. He stood up. His legs felt weak, but his voice was steady. I accept. The room erupted in conversation. Ambassador Chen closed her eyes in dismay. Princess Kaylin looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Throck's grin widened. Excellent. The trial will be held tomorrow in the ceremonial arena. Standard format. 3 challenges. We will see what humans are truly made of. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. His communication device buzzed several times with messages from Ambassador Chen, but he didn't have the courage to answer them yet. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on his door. When he opened it, Princess Kaylin stood there alone except for one guard who waited at a distance. "May I come in?" she asked. Jake nodded and stepped aside. Princess Kaylin entered his small quarters and looked around at the simple furniture. "You should not have accepted," she said quietly. "Probably not," Jake agreed. "But what choice did I have? You could have refused. I would have understood. And then everything you're trying to do would be harder," Jake said. "Throck would have used it against you." "Against us." Princess Kaylin was quiet for a moment. "The trial of merit is not designed to be fair. It tests strength, compatibility, and strategic thinking. Humans are not known for any of these in galactic terms." "I know," Jake said. "I've been reading about it. I'm probably going to lose badly." "Yes," Princess Kaylin said bluntly. "You probably will. But there is losing, and then there is losing with dignity. If you must fail, fail in a way that shows courage. That at least the galaxy respects." "Thanks for the pep talk," Jake said with a weak smile. Princess Kaylin's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry. I did not intend to put you in this position." "It's not your fault," Jake said. "Throck was going to come after me anyway. At least this way it's official and has rules." "Perhaps," Princess Kaylin said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." After she left, Jake lay back down and tried to sleep. But his mind kept racing, thinking about what was coming. Finally, around 3 in the morning, he gave up and went to the station's information center. If he was going to embarrass himself tomorrow, he wanted to at least understand what he was getting into. The ceremonial arena was massive. It could hold thousands of spectators, and from what Jake could see as he walked onto the floor, it was completely full. Apparently, word had spread quickly about the human who had dared to accept the trial of merit. Throck stood on the opposite side of the arena, looking confident and powerful in his ceremonial armor. Jake wore simple training clothes that the Vraxian staff had provided. He felt small and exposed. An official, a being covered in blue feathers, stepped to the center of the arena and raised her arms. "The trial of merit will consist of 3 challenges," she announced in a voice that carried throughout the space. "Strength, combat, and strategy. The challenger may choose one ally to stand with them. War Chief Throck, as the one who issued the challenge, will provide the opposition." Jake hadn't known he could have an ally. He looked around, confused. Princess Kaylin stepped onto the arena floor. "I will stand with him," the crowd murmured in surprise. It was unusual for someone of her rank to participate in a trial of merit. But Throck looked pleased rather than concerned. "How touching," he said mockingly. "Very well. Let us begin." The first challenge was pure strength. A massive stone block was brought to the center of the arena. The goal was simple: lift it as high as possible. Throck went first. He gripped the block with his powerful arms and lifted it above his head with a roar. The crowd cheered. He held it there for several seconds before setting it down. Jake stepped up to the block. He knew before he even touched it that this was impossible. The thing probably weighed half a ton. He bent down, gripped the edges, and pulled with everything he had. The block didn't move. He tried again, straining until his muscles burned. The block shifted slightly, maybe an inch off the ground, before settling back down. The crowd made sounds that his translator interpreted as laughter. Jake stepped back, breathing hard. He had failed the first challenge completely. Princess Kaylin touched his shoulder briefly, a gesture of support, but her face was troubled. The second challenge was combat. Not to the death, but to submission or incapacity. The assassination attempt happened that night. Jake was walking back to his quarters after another long subcommittee meeting. His body still ached from the trial of merit, and his mind was exhausted from hours of diplomatic discussions. He was alone in the corridor, or so he thought. A figure in diplomatic robes approached from a side passage. Jake paid little attention at first. The station was full of delegates moving between meetings. But something made him look twice. The way the figure moved was wrong. Too tense, too focused. Jake saw the glint of metal under the robes. He didn't think. He just reacted. "Gun!" he shouted, diving to the side. The figure dropped the pretense and raised a weapon. But Jake's warning had been heard. 2 Vraxian guards appeared from around a corner, and Princess Kaelin stepped out of a room just ahead. The assassin hesitated for a split second, uncertain which target to choose. That hesitation cost them everything. The Vraxian guards moved with incredible speed, disarming and subduing the assassin in seconds. More guards appeared, surrounding the area. Princess Kaelin walked calmly to where Jake had fallen. She extended one of her hands to help him up. "Are you injured?" "No," Jake said, accepting her help. His heart was pounding, just scared. Who was that? The guards had removed the assassin's hood. The face beneath was Corthan. Red scales and burning eyes, just like War Chief Throck. The assassin spat something in their language that Jake's translator rendered as a curse. "Take them to holding," Princess Kaelin ordered. "Inform Emperor Voresh immediately. This is an act of war." The guards dragged the assassin away. Princess Kaelin turned to Jake. "You saved my life. If you had not noticed them, if you had not warned me, I would likely be dead." "I just saw something wrong and reacted," Jake said. His hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. "Nevertheless, you have my gratitude," Princess Kaelin said. "And you have given us proof of what we suspected. The Corthan will stop at nothing to see their Tributary Species Act passed, even assassination." Within hours, the entire station knew what had happened. Emperor Voresh summoned War Chief Throck to a formal inquiry. Throck denied any involvement, claiming the assassin had acted alone, driven by personal hatred of Princess Kaelin. But no one believed it. Assassination was not a crime of passion for Corthan. It was a political tool. The Emperor's response was swift and public. He announced that the Vraxian Empire could not support the Tributary Species Act, any legislation that drove its supporters to attempt. The murder of his daughter was fundamentally flawed. The political landscape of the summit shifted overnight. Jake sat in a meeting with Princess Kaelin and several of her advisors. They were in a secure room swept for listening devices, and the conversation was frank. "The Emperor's withdrawal has changed everything," one advisor said. He was an older Vraxian with gray skin and wise eyes. "Without Vraxian support, the Tributary Species Act cannot pass. But it also means we have made enemies of the Corthan and their allies." "They were already our enemies," Princess Kaelin said. "Now it is simply open." "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Does the summit just end?" "No," Princess Kaelin said. "The summit continues. But now we have an opportunity. Without the threat of the Tributary Act hanging over them, smaller species may be willing to speak freely. We can build something new." "What kind of something?" Jake asked. Princess Kaelin looked at him thoughtfully. "What would you suggest?" Jake felt all eyes in the room turn to him. He was still just an aide, still completely out of his depth. But Princess Kaelin had asked him to be honest, to give his perspective. So he tried. "In the strategy simulation," he said slowly, "the thing that made my approach work was the alliances, the small civilizations helping each other. Maybe we need something like that for real. Some kind of agreement where smaller species can band together for mutual protection and support." One of the advisors made a dismissive sound. "That has been tried before. It always fails. When a true threat appears, the small scatter. They have no real strength." "Maybe they scatter because they're not really united," Jake said. "Maybe if there was something formal, something that gave them actual structure and support, it would work better." "An alliance of the weak," another advisor said skeptically. "What would be the point?" "They would still be weak together." "Would they?" Jake asked. He was thinking out loud now, working through the idea. Think about it. 40 small species working together could have real economic power, real resources, real influence. They wouldn't be able to match something like the Corthan military, but they could defend themselves. And if they had a strong partner like Vrax backing them up. He trailed off, suddenly aware that he might have said too much. But Princess Kaelin was leaning forward, her golden eyes bright with interest. "Go on," she said. "It's crazy," Jake said. "But what if Vrax offered to be the protector of a coalition of smaller species? Not as conquerors or masters, but as allies. The small species would keep their independence, their governments, their choices, but they'd have Vraxian military backing if threatened. In return, they could offer economic cooperation, cultural exchange, intelligence sharing. Why would Vrax do this? An advisor asked. What does my empire gain from protecting species that cannot offer equal strength? Jake thought about how to answer. He remembered Princess Kaylin's words about true leadership. Loyalty, he said finally. Real loyalty, not the kind you get from fear. And perspective. My strategy simulation worked because different civilizations brought different ideas. Vrax is powerful, but even powerful empires can have blind spots. A coalition of diverse species could see problems that Vrax might miss. They could innovate in ways Vrax hasn't thought of. They could be partners, not just subjects. The room was silent. Jake couldn't tell if they thought he was brilliant or insane. Then Emperor Voresh himself spoke. Jake hadn't even realized the Emperor had entered the room. The ruler of half the galaxy stood in the doorway, having listened to the entire conversation. Interesting, the Emperor said. His voice was deep and resonant. The human proposes that Vrax gain power by giving it away. Jake's mouth went dry. He stood quickly and bowed, not sure of the proper protocol. Your Majesty, I apologize if I spoke out of turn. You spoke honestly, the Emperor said, as my daughter requested. That is no crime. He walked into the room and everyone else bowed. The Emperor was even more impressive in person than Jake had imagined. He was larger than Princess Kaylin, his blue skin darker, his forearms moving with absolute authority. Tell me, Jake Morrison, the Emperor said, why should I trust that these smaller species would honor such an agreement? What prevents them from taking our protection and giving nothing in return? Because it wouldn't be just about protection, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. It would be a real partnership. They'd have representation in decisions. They'd have a voice. People are more loyal to things they feel they're part of rather than things that are imposed on them. And if I am wrong? The Emperor asked. If I extend this offer and it weakens Vrax? If our enemies see it as a sign of softness? Then I'll be the one who gave you bad advice, Jake said. And history will remember me as the human who accidentally damaged the Vraxian Empire. But I don't think that will happen. I think you'll end up stronger than before. Just a different kind of strong. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. Jake tried not to fidget under that intense gaze. You saved my daughter's life, the Emperor said. That gives your words weight. Very well, we will try this idea of yours. Princess Kaylin, begin reaching out to the smaller species. Offer them this partnership. We will call it the Free Species Coalition. Make it clear that we are not offering domination but alliance. Yes, Father, Princess Kaylin said. She looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. And Jake Morrison, the Emperor added, you will help draft the terms of this coalition. If it fails, you will share in the blame. But if it succeeds, you will share in the credit. I understand, Your Majesty, Jake said. After the Emperor left, Jake sat down heavily. His legs felt weak. Had that really just happened? Had he just convinced the ruler of half the galaxy to try his crazy idea? Princess Kaylin was smiling. You have a talent for this. For what? Making things up as I go and hoping they work? For seeing possibilities that others miss, she said. That is a rare gift. Over the next 3 days, Princess Kaylin and Jake met with representatives from dozens of smaller species. The response was overwhelming. Species that had been silent during the main summit session suddenly became vocal. They spoke about their fears, their hopes, their desperate need for protection against larger powers. Jake listened to stories that broke his heart. A species whose homeworld had been strip-mined by a larger civilization and then abandoned. A people who had been forced to give up their children as tribute to serve in foreign militaries. A civilization that had lost its right to govern itself and lived under the rule of conquerors, who didn't even speak their language. And humanity wasn't much better off than any of them. Earth was small, weak, vulnerable. The only difference was that they hadn't been targeted yet. Ambassador Chen watched the coalition forming with a mixture of hope and fear. She pulled Jake aside one evening. This is bigger than I thought it would be, she said. 43 specks. The Corthan fleet appeared at the border of coalition space 3 days after the vote. It wasn't a full invasion force. That would have been a clear act of war. Instead, Throck called it a military exercise. 50 warships, heavily armed, conducting maneuvers right at the edge of territory claimed by the smaller species who had joined the coalition. The message was clear. We can crush you whenever we want. Jake stood in the command center aboard the Vraxian flagship with Princess Kaylin, Ambassador Chen, and Admiral Kyle Bennett, the highest-ranking human military officer in the sector. The display showed the Korthan ships moving in formation, their weapons powered but not locked on targets. They're testing us, Admiral Bennett said. He was a tall man with gray hair and a calm demeanor that Jake found reassuring. Seeing if we'll back down or respond with force. If we respond with force, we start a war, Princess Kaylin said. The Coalition has defensive capabilities, but we cannot match the Korthan military in open combat. Not yet. And if we do nothing, the Coalition falls apart, Ambassador Chen added. The smaller species joined because they believed we would protect them. If we can't, they'll withdraw. Jake stared at the display. 50 warships, each one capable of destroying cities. He thought about all the species who had trusted them, all the small civilizations who had dared to hope that they could be safe. We can't win a fight, Jake said slowly. But maybe we don't need to fight. Everyone turned to look at him. What do you mean? Princess Kaylin asked. Jake's mind was racing. He thought about the trial of merit, about the strategy simulation, about every lesson he'd learned over the past weeks. Thrak is trying to make us fight on his terms, Jake said. Military strength against military strength. But that's not the only kind of strength. What if we change the game? Explain, Princess Kaylin said. The Korthan are counting on us being afraid, Jake said. They think fear will make us either run away or attack stupidly. But what if we do neither? What if we show them something they don't expect? Like what? Admiral Bennett asked skeptically. Courage without violence, Jake said. What if we send civilian ships, diplomatic vessels, medical ships, science vessels? What if we form a blockade not of military power but of people? Let Thrak explain to the entire galaxy why he's firing on unarmed ships. The room went silent. That's insane, Admiral Bennett said finally. You're talking about putting civilians in the line of fire. Volunteers only, Jake said. People who understand the risk and choose to take it. The Korthan are warriors. They value strength, but even warriors have codes. Thrak would have to order his people to fire on defenseless ships while the whole galaxy watches. That's not strength. That's murder. It's also incredibly dangerous, Ambassador Chen said. But her voice wasn't dismissive. She was considering it. Princess Kaylin walked to the display and studied the Korthan formation. The summit is still in session. All major powers have observers watching this situation. If we broadcast everything, the entire galaxy will witness what happens. That's the point, Jake said. This isn't just about stopping the Korthan. It's about showing everyone what the Coalition stands for. We're not conquerors. We're not soldiers. We're people who believe in something better. And if Thrak fires anyway? Admiral Bennett asked. If he's willing to commit that atrocity? Then the entire galaxy will see the Korthan for what they are, Princess Kaylin said. And we will have the moral authority to respond with full force. Every species in the galaxy would support us. It's a gamble, Ambassador Chen said. Everything is a gamble, Jake replied. But this one plays to our strengths instead of our weaknesses. Princess Kaylin looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to her communication officer. Send a message to all Coalition ships. Tell them what we're planning. Make it clear that participation is voluntary. No one will be forced. The response shocked everyone. Within 6 hours, more than 200 ships had volunteered. Civilian transports, diplomatic vessels, hospital ships, research craft. They came from 40 different species, and leading them was a small human science vessel called the Pioneer, with Admiral Bennett's own daughter, Commander Lisa Bennett, in command. The human Earth government sent an emergency message. They wanted to pull their ships out. It was too dangerous. But Jake helped Ambassador Chen draft a response that was short and clear. Humanity stands with its allies. The fleet of civilian ships moved slowly toward the Korthan formation. They didn't raise shields. They didn't power weapons. They simply moved forward, broadcasting on all frequencies. Jake was aboard Princess Kaylin's flagship watching it happen. The broadcast he had helped write was playing on repeat. To the Korthan Dominion, we are the Free Species Coalition. We are unarmed. We seek no conflict. But we will not be intimidated. Behind us are worlds full of people who deserve to live in peace. We stand together and we will not move. If you wish to pass, you will have to fire on civilians while the galaxy watches. The choice is yours. The message repeated in dozens of languages, and every major news network in the galaxy was broadcasting live footage. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The civilian fleet formed a wall between the Corthan ships and Coalition space. Thousands of people, unarmed and vulnerable, standing between war and peace. Then Throck's voice came over the communication channels. "This is a military exercise. You are interfering with legitimate operations. Move aside or face the consequences." Princess Kaylin responded personally. Her voice was calm and clear. "This is diplomatic territory. You have no authority here. We have every right to be present." "We will not move. You are condemning your people to death," Throck snarled. "No," Princess Kaylin said. "You are the one who would have to give that order. The whole galaxy is watching, War Chief. They will see if you are truly a warrior, or simply a murderer who fires on the defenseless." Jake could see on the displays that Throck's ships were powering up their weapons. His heart was in his throat. What if he was wrong? What if Throck was willing to massacre civilians to make his point? But then something unexpected happened. On Throck's own ships there was activity. Internal communications were spiking. Jake realized what was happening. Throck's own warriors were questioning the order. Even among the Corthan, firing on unarmed civilians was dishonorable. The standoff continued for 3 days. The civilian fleet held their position. Ships from across the galaxy arrived to watch in person. The story dominated every news channel. Public opinion across the galaxy was overwhelmingly in support of the coalition. Jake didn't sleep much during those 3 days. He stayed on the bridge watching the displays, waiting for something to happen. Princess Kaylin was always there too, steady and calm. On the 3rd day, a new ship appeared. It was massive, a Corthan Imperial vessel. Emperor Zakmor, the ruler of the Corthan Dominion, had come personally. A private communication channel opened. Emperor Zakmor wanted to speak with Emperor Voresh and Princess Kaylin. Jake wasn't included in that conversation, but he heard about it afterward. The Corthan Emperor had faced a rebellion within his own ranks. His warriors were refusing orders. The public across his empire was divided. Half were calling for war. The other half were questioning whether Throck's approach brought honor or shame to their people. A compromise was reached. The Corthan fleet would withdraw. In exchange, both empires would agree to a neutral buffer zone and ongoing diplomatic talks. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't victory. It was something more complicated. Mutual recognition that neither side could win without massive cost. When the Corthan ships finally turned and left, the civilian fleet erupted in celebration. Ships broadcast music and lights. People cried with relief. Jake stood on the bridge and felt his legs go weak. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had done it. The formal vote on recognizing the Free Species Coalition happened the next day. With the Corthan challenge resolved peacefully, and the entire galaxy having watched smaller species stand together with courage, the vote was almost unanimous. Even species that had been skeptical before voted in favor. The coalition was official. The closing ceremony of the summit was different from the opening. This time, when Jake walked into the assembly hall, he wasn't invisible. Delegates from dozens of species nodded to him in respect. Some even smiled. He sat beside Princess Kaylin at the high table, and this time it didn't feel wrong. He had earned this seat not through power or conquest, but through something else. Through believing that people mattered more than politics. When the speeches began, Princess Kaylin stood to address the assembly. Jake had helped her write the speech, and he knew what was coming. "This summit began with old ways," she said, "with hierarchy and dominance, with the belief that strength is found only in power and territory. But it ends with a new understanding. We have learned that true strength is found in standing together, in protecting each other, in seeing all people as worthy of dignity and respect." She gestured to Jake. "A human aid taught us this, not through grand speeches or military might, but through simple acts of kindness. He helped a servant pick up fallen glasses when others walked by. He accepted an impossible challenge when he could have refused. He proposed an alliance of equals when others saw only weakness." Princess Kaylin's golden eyes swept across the assembly. "The free spec.